Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Mayor of the City of Oakland, Sheng Tao, and Senior Congressional Reporter, NBC News, Scott Wong.
Thank you. Is this on? Okay. Thank you all for being here today. We are very excited to have the Mayor of Oakland with us today, Mayor Tao. It's the first time I've gotten a chance to meet you, but I'm very excited about our conversation on such an important topic, housing, affordable housing, homelessness. I just have to say that I got my start in journalism in the East Bay, working for, writing for a newspaper covering the city of Fremont. Oh, wow. And in the East Bay, and one of the issues that I covered was not only the city council, but affordable housing, economic development, redevelopment, and so these are issues that I've been watching for quite some time. So as I was reading about your personal story, a theme throughout that narrative was housing and housing instability. You had bouts of homelessness. Mm-hmm. I understand. Talk about how housing, how that affected your childhood, how that affected your family, and how that shapes how you think about housing issues today.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. So, we all know that housing should be a basic human right? I think intuitively we know that and we understand that. And so growing up as a daughter of refugees, my parents, they escaped genocide during the Vietnam War. There was a secret war, and they came to the United States in 1979 into a whole new world where they had no skills, where they never had a formal education, illiterate, and with that understanding and trying to provide your family with housing, yes, we were on social services our whole life and we were in public housing, but the feeling of instability and insecurity around housing, it transferred onto us as kids. We knew that we were sleeping, like 4 to a tiny room that mirrored maybe a closet size, and we knew that wasn't right. But my parents did what they could, and then after leaving college, leaving high school, I found myself in a domestic violence relationship. And after I was about 6 months pregnant, he pulls me down from my hair, brings me down to the ground, starts kicking me in my stomach. And I just remember thinking, protect my baby. And so 4 years I endured this domestic violence, and I couldn't leave for myself, but I wanted to leave for my child. And so I did. And I wound up feeling like I was all alone, like I was in a unique situation, and I couldn't afford housing. I had a full-time job, but I couldn't pay for first month, last month, and deposit. And so in the whole scheme of things, because I couldn't afford to pay the first month, last month, and deposit, somehow that excluded me from being worthy enough to actually have housing, is how I felt. And so I had to sleep in my car. And when you are in a situation like that, where you're just trying to survive, it creates all this mental health issues that you are unaware about, right? Or unaware of. And not just that, but it creates this anxiety that you definitely transfer to your kids, if you have kids. And in that time, I transferred it to my son. And I remember he was such an anxious little boy. And I don't know much about biology, but I'm pretty sure that the trauma is there. And even then, sleeping on strangers' couches, even after having my son, continue to sleep in my car, it's not a good feeling, right? You feel inadequate as a parent, and I can understand why a lot of people turn to different vices, and when we talk about, how do we actually, help with public safety or what have you, it's an ecosystem, and that ecosystem starts with the basics, and that's stability, and stability equates to housing, and that's just point blank. And so for me, housing is such a personal issue, and it's actually framed how I see the way that I lead as a leader in the city of Oakland, where we have about 5,000 people who are living on our streets unhoused. And so it is a very personal thing for me.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing from you is that housing seems to be tied to all of these various social issues. You mentioned a few of them. I mean, domestic violence, mental health issues, other health issues, the list goes on, and it is, as you mentioned, sort of like a web of social issues.
Absolutely. I mean, think of it this way. Like, I had a car. I was blessed enough to have a car. Imagine a young woman or a young man who is in a domestic violence relationship and they didn't even have a car. Mind you, in a domestic violence relationship, and of course there are many other scenarios, but because this is my personal story and I know it intimately, I'll use it as an example. But imagine if you don't have family and you don't have friends, because that's what domestic violence relationship puts you in. They tear down all of your support system, and you didn't have a car. Now, would you choose to go on the streets with your baby or pregnant, or would you continue to stay with your abuser? I would totally say that if I didn't have a car, I would continue to stay with my abuser. And now, what kind of choice is that? It's not a choice, it's an ultimatum. An ultimatum that government and society have bestowed upon people. And let's just be very clear, domestic violence travels throughout all sorts of socioeconomic statuses, but it is always, always Black, brown, and low-income families that suffer the most.
As you know, I cover Capitol Hill. I've moved away from local politics. I'm now just down the street at the Capitol covering the House and the Senate. Nancy Pelosi has, who I'm sure you know well, has this phrase that she often utters on Capitol Hill, which is, show me your budget, show me your values. Your budget for the city, your new budget, commits $200 million for affordable housing. That is a record for the city of Oakland. Explain to the audience what that $200 million
I would
looks
take
like.
an applaud. Absolutely. It is, your budget is always an interface of what your values are. And yes, we are going to be spending $200 million in not just housing, but in affordable and deeply affordable housing. In the city of Oakland, we have surpassed 100%. We're at probably 160% of market rate. And yet, in regards to our RENA number, the number that we're legally bound to produce in regards to market rate, affordable and deeply affordable, the affordable and deeply affordable has barely been chipped at. And so for me, I am excited to take on the challenge of building 26,000 more units in the city of Oakland by 2031. And so with that being said, having the $200 million of historic funds, this is the most the city of Oakland has ever committed to affordable and deeply affordable housing. That speaks to my values in the sense that, again, housing should be a human right, and it is a basic right. And when we talk about the city of Oakland, diversity is our strength. And if we can't keep our Black community there, if we can't keep our brown community and our communities that have been there for generations, then that is diluting what Oakland is. And no one wants to see that. People come to Oakland to see and be part of our diversity and our culture. And so the preservation of that is so important to me.
I want to ask you, so I'm a huge Golden State Warriors fan, have been since, oh no, we have some Laker fans here? What? I was a Warriors fan from the start with Run TMC. I didn't hop on the bandwagon just recently, okay. But, the Warriors left for San Francisco, the A's, the Raiders have left for Las Vegas. It's a sad era for Oakland sports fans. But I think this also can be a moment of opportunity because you have this tremendous parcel where the Coliseum and the arena are. It's on a BART line. Mm-hmm. There's transportation there. What is your vision for that property? And, is housing a part of that?
Absolutely. And to the sports fans, I must say that we actually have a professional soccer team who's terrific. It's the Oakland Roots. And mind you, soccer is actually the most, it's the growing sport out of all of those sports. So I'm promoting that. But yes, so we have the Oakland Roots and we have a women's team too, the Oakland Soul. But around the Coliseum, it is the largest publicly owned site, I believe, in Northern California. And Well, it's half publicly owned because the county owns the other half, which they sold to the A's, and that's a whole thing. But when we do finally develop it, absolutely, there must be housing. We have to see this as an ecosystem. And it's unfortunate that the A's may be leaving the city of Oakland. However, that's not a done deal yet. But whatever we do at the Coliseum must consist of housing because, again, we are going through a housing crisis and especially affordable housing crisis.
Okay, I have one other question I wanted to ask you before I bring on our other guests, and that is, COVID funds, which really had helped with rental assistance and other housing assistance during the last 3 years had been an enormous help. Those funds are now starting to dry up. Are you seeing any impact, from those funds not being available, from people trying to seek those assistance, federal assistance, and it not being there anymore?
Absolutely. I think the city of Oakland is one of the cities that are feeling that hit really hard. We use a lot of our federal fund dollars, to actually pay for ongoing services. And with the projection of, our hotel taxes and our taxes when sales happen in regards to properties hasn't climbed as what we thought it would. And so the city of Oakland is actually facing a huge deficit, $360 million over the next 2 years. It is the largest deficit in Oakland's history. It's even worse than the Great Recession as well, too. And so I just actually announced my balanced budget just early last week. And it is a balanced budget, but a budget is values, about your values. And many people would go out and decide that they would send out layoff notices to your labor unions. I have been able to balance the budget with no layoff notices for any city workers who's currently there. And more so than that, usually right after that is the services piece that gets cut. No, we are actually, I'm opening up all rec centers, programming to the full effect, and we are cutting a lot of the fat from the upper level. I'm doing a reorganization of the city of Oakland where we are now combining some of the departments, and many of these jobs do some overlap work anyhow. And so we're really, when we talk about public safety or quality of life, it's really about like delivering and continue to deliver their services so that our young people can be put in programming, be tired, and go home, right? And that's how we keep ourselves safe. And not just that, but we're investing millions of dollars into paid internships year-round as well, too. We got to get money into our young people's pockets. And so, but I was able to work with my wonderful team to really balance the budget with all of those values at the forefront.
Okay, we're going to talk more about the mayor's budget and how she'll pay for some of these things as well, but I'm going to have Mayor Tao stay put, and we're going to bring on a couple more of our panelists. We have Stacy Spann, who is the head of housing philanthropy for Wells Fargo, and I just met Stacy, great guy, and we have Seema Agnani, who is executive director for the National Coalition of Asian Pacific American Community Development, known as Capacity, right? And we promised we wouldn't get too much into the acronyms today because there are a lot in the housing space, Seema. But I wanted to ask you, Seema, let's have both of you guys sort of introduce yourselves, but I wanted to frame the first question. There's a debate happening in the AA and NHPI community about whether it's time to rethink things, terms like Asian American. They tend to be all-encompassing and very broad. It tends to paint all of us with one brush and treats all of us like we are all the same in a monolith. Can each of you guys talk about the work that you and your organization is doing to address the disparities that exist around housing and home ownership within the AA and NHPI community? Do you want to start, Seema?
Sure, thank you. And thank you so much for having me. National capacity, pun very much intended. Our goal is really to build local capacity in communities. And also, I sit here in Washington, D.C. We are also a coalition at this point, more than 150 community-based organizations working in Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities across the US and the Pacific Islands. So I myself used to work with one of our member organizations in Queens, New York. Have a board member here, Alisi. Hello. But to your question of, so we function both as an intermediary as well as a coalition. So we drive national resources to our member organizations through grants, training, technical assistance, and we also convene our members frequently so groups can learn from one another, strategize. And then on the national level, we really work to do the advocacy here in Washington, D.C. In terms of your question about not being a monolith, I know everyone here knows and feels that issue well. The one thing I'll share is when I was working in Queens, New York, it was primarily with the South Asian community. And during the foreclosure crisis, all the national data said that white and Asian Americans were doing fine, Black and Latinx communities were struggling, and meanwhile, our offices were flooded with people facing foreclosure. And so we did some work to advocate for the HMDA data to be disaggregated. So I'm proud to say that now better data is available, but at that time, it really brought the point to surface that we need better data that really surfaces the nuances between our different communities. So, yeah.
Stacy?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Stacy Spann, head of housing access and affordability at Wells Fargo Foundation. I love that word nuance. So I'm gonna take an opportunity to ride on your coattails just for a moment. I think that is artful in so many ways. The United States is perhaps the greatest country in the world for opportunity, but it's not without cost. It does not come without cost. And some of that, and you all know this better than I do, means this constant drum around giving up your authenticity, right? And joining a larger group. What I think that does is demean community. I think it demeans family, and there are some unintentional consequences, and that is that we forget ourselves because we're forgotten. So when it comes to what we're doing as a foundation, the Wells Fargo Foundation invests roughly $300 million across our nation every single year. That's more investment than the Rockefeller Foundation. Most of that is through housing access and affordability. And we do it at the ground level with our community relations team. There are 55 or 56 of the most talented professionals who are meeting organizations where they are. But that noted, we know that there are communities that get lost in the conversation. And part of that is because there is so much stigma around housing insecurity in the United States. And who wants to go in some office and tell someone all of your deepest, darkest secrets and challenges only to come up with no solutions? Almost no one. There's not a community that would do that, not willingly. And so what it really highlights for me is that we have to get much more granular in the way that we're communicating with folks. And I think the first thing is it starts with dignity and humanity and lifting up entire communities around the thing. In this case, it happens to be housing access and affordability. And I'll just highlight that our foundation president changed the name of the group to really focus on access, because we can build many units across the United States. Doesn't necessarily mean the folks who need them most have access to them. Doesn't mean that the folks who need it most can actually stay in those homes. So we've just, I think in general, have to do a much better job clarifying how we're helping and supporting and partnering with communities. And that means first we've got to see them and have the difficult conversations.
Mayor, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, and that is, in San Francisco and Oakland specifically, we see these economic disparities right in front of our faces, and also within the AA, PI community. And so, how do you think, we can educate, inform other people about the differences within our broader community? What would you say to folks who want to learn more?
Absolutely. I always say that everything, so earlier I talked about ecosystem, and this part here is about ecosystem as well too. I think that what we're seeing happening in the city of Oakland specifically is there's a socioeconomic divide, right? The wealthier are wealthier than ever. The poorer people are poorer than ever. And this is why you're seeing symptoms of that. You see tents and what have you. And I think that, when people come together and learn more about each other, no matter if you're black, brown, whatever background that you have, I think that when people come together and understand and break bread and understand all of the different pressures that you're under and all of the different stressors that you're under, that we are all more alike and have more in common than anyone else. And if I can just go back to when I asked my father, when you landed here in the United States in 1979 and were dropped off in Rhode Island, and didn't know anything, like, how did you feel? He said, this was my first time I ever saw a black person. This was the first time I ever saw a brown person that looked different. Everyone looked different. But what I did see is that we were all the same people, because we were all waiting in those social services line. We were all waiting for the bus stop. And somehow, it was innate to all of us that somehow it was the white man who was holding the power, because it was the majority of us that looked like us in line. So I just felt like we were one, even though we couldn't communicate. And I think that, when he said that, that really, spoke volumes in regards to like how we are more similar than not. And in regards to our AAPI community, I think that we have to continue to demand to talk about how we have different struggles, how our struggles are intrinsically different. And I'm the first Southeast Asian mayor in the city of Oakland, and I speak about that all the time. We have our first South Asian council member on the city council, and we speak about that all the time. And so it's truly through education that it's needed. A lot of people do want to know what it means to be Hmong American. They want to know, what does it mean to be a South Asian. And so I think that if we continue to talk about it and be, again, genuine and be unapologetic about who we are, where we come from, and how our struggles are different but similar, I think that's the only way that we can move forward.
Yeah, and I think by virtue of you just holding the position that you have and being in that visible place, you are doing a lot to educate the broader public about a lot of those issues. So thank you for that. Seema, I wanted to ask, for the AAPI community, what do you think are the biggest obstacles, challenges, barriers to entry for home ownership or access to affordable housing? What are people up against?
Well, up against a lot. I want to thank the mayor for all your work already that you have done, and for sharing your story. Very courageous. So appreciate all you're doing. But so national capacity. We know that within our community there is extreme wealth in the Asian American community. We have to own that also. But on the other end of the economic spectrum, we have extreme poverty. And so national capacity really focuses on the lower end of the economic spectrum. And the hurdles are immense. The vast majority of low-income Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders live in the highest cost cities. In fact, 53% live in the 10 most expensive metro areas of this country. And so as a result, home ownership is extremely challenging. One, there really isn't any affordable housing left to buy. And also, our folks are competing against corporate investors now who are buying up our neighborhoods. A lot of the neighborhoods that were facing foreclosure back in 2008, some of those neighborhoods are now 40% owned by investors. So it was those same homeowners who were struggling eventually lost their homes and they were bought by investors. And so that's a real challenge. Of course, language access and down payment assistance, like the rest of the country, is always a challenge. For renters, you know, in addition to building more affordable housing, we need to preserve what is there, right? So in places like Oakland, Los Angeles, New York, Hawaii, there is housing that is affordable, it's owned by the community, but it needs taking care of, right? So we need to also be investing in bringing those homes up to code, making them safe, making them healthy, because it's a lot of older housing stock. And we also know our communities live in multi-generational households more often than other communities. And part of that is economic, right? Can't afford a big home, so people share. But part of it is also a choice. And so we also need different types of housing to accommodate larger family sizes.
Something you mentioned really struck me, and that was this idea that investors are coming into all of these communities and buying up tons of property because it is, as we know, real estate is a great investment. People are quick to realize that. Stacey, you have any thoughts on what could be done about that? I mean, is legislation needed at the state level or federal level?
Well, I have many thoughts. And what I'll say is I have spent a significant amount of time on the public sector in housing and also the private sector. And what I'll first say is that legislation by itself doesn't actually get a lot done. You see, actually today in Colorado, the first statewide right of first refusal legislation passed in the United States, first statewide ever. And what it does essentially is restrict acquisitions to a certain group of folks and gives public agencies the opportunity to purchase those housing units, those properties before the market does. The challenge is, what are the capital markets going to do? What cities are going to put up $2 billion to make sure that there's housing preservation continuously and new construction? Because the challenge, the reason that we're in this, there are many, but one of the most significant is even leading up to the Great Recession, frankly, there was not enough rental housing built. There was a huge emphasis on for sale, and so we saw single-family communities undergird themselves and guard against the entry of multifamily. We didn't see a lot of construction of multifamily. And so with that supply curve daunted, what happens naturally is pricing goes up, right? Because we're still procreating, right? Folks are still, their families are growing. People are leaving the nest. They're graduating from college. They're graduating from graduate school. They're starting their own families. That's a demand issue. And so pricing goes up, and as markets do, and as the private sector does, they saw an opportunity, pounced on it, and here we are. Now, that's not simply a legislative issue, right? What we have to realize is exactly what the mayor and Seema were talking about, and that is that the communities you live in, while they might be undervalued, are still valuable, right? You talked about the arena being right next to BART. Well, BART's in vogue now because it's hard to get into the city otherwise. It's at least fast, unless you leave 5 o'clock in the morning. Even then, when I've been in California, pretty difficult to travel into San Francisco, right? I take BART every single time I'm on the West Coast or I'm in the Bay Area. I like BART. It's no different than the New York City subway. It's no different than the train here in DC. So that's an actual amenity that folks are teeming toward. And unfortunately, the market has just not provided enough of the asset class that we all need. And I think that spectrum is housing affordability broadly. And what has to happen is we've got to figure out how to actually jumpstart that construction.
Yeah, so you're talking about volume and sheer number housing units. I'm going to ask Seema this in a second, but I want to start with you, Mayor. I mean, are there ways that we could think outside the box of how to put more housing units onto the market? I mean, there's the thing that gets the big headlines recently are these tiny homes, this idea of tiny homes. I don't know how you feel about those, but are there other ideas out there of, converting existing types of buildings that you've thought about?
Absolutely. In the city of Oakland, we had a lot of these dilapidated hotels that are now being bought and then turning them into, some of them are being turned into condos. However, there are many of them that are being turned into and being preserved as affordable housing. And to your point, yes, the 3 Ps, right? You have to produce, you have to protect, and you have to preserve. And so in the city of Oakland, what we're doing is that we are looking at how we can work with our faith-based institution. In the city of Oakland itself, we have the most faith-based institution west of the Mississippi. And so with that being said, they have a lot of property that they want to build up because it works all around, right? The members can live in these housing units, but we have to work with the federal government around what it looks like around housing vouchers that are tied to housing units, right? With this like negative stigma, a false negative stigma around housing vouchers. A lot of people are finding it hard to actually live in the city that they receive the voucher. And so, but if we work with our faith-based institutions and we can build up, that's how we can tie it to housing in a natural way. More so than that, it's also, we are in a whole new era post-pandemic, right? You're seeing that in the downtown area, our storefronts are no longer, there's actually no storefronts out there anymore. And so how do we repurpose that? And you're looking at, when you talk about housing, you can't talk about housing without jobs, right? And how you're going to pay for the housing. And so I think that how we get people into home ownership. I'm a renter. I'm the first mayor who's a renter in Oakland anyway, by the way. And so I'm trying to get myself a house. I'm just kidding, but not really. So, and so we're rezoning these storefronts so that there could be micro businesses in them, so that we can have our entrepreneurs in our city be able to open up their business in these micro spaces, shared spaces. And then it allows for the economy to actually help the city out too, because guess what? Now people are going to come out and shop in these micro businesses. They want to support, to your point, it's like a lot of people live in these really expensive cities. And they want to spend their money, and so we have to create the space for them to spend their funds. More so than that, it's also about, when I'm really big on making sure that we talk about our Native Americans as well too. In the city of Oakland, we've given land back to a Sorority Land Trust, which is the Native American Land Trust out in the East Bay. And so really protecting that area. And then I don't believe that government is a good property management holder. And so what the goal is under this administration is really to do the first right of refusal and allowing for land trusts to hold the land so that we can protect and preserve the affordable housing stock that we currently have, right? And then also expand that stock as well. But again, I don't believe that government does a great job at upkeeping, and so that's why it's important to work with the land trust.
Can I just intercede real quick?
Yeah, sure.
And Oakland, to me, is fascinating because it is one of the cities that has this sort of undercurrent of organizations, nonprofits, who are now investigating alternative forms of ownership as well. And so you're seeing shared ownership, condominium buildings, condo buildings, and the like. And those structures, I think, in particularly expensive cities like San Francisco and like Oakland has become, are going to be critical in order for folks to actually get some homeownership benefits.
Seema, backstage we were talking about something the mayor just alluded to, which is vacancy rates. And specifically, we were talking about vacancy rates in office buildings as people are not coming into work, 5 days a week. Companies, including my own, we're scaling back on office space. And so there is a glut of office space in these downtowns, as I'm sure is the case with Oakland and San Francisco. Is that an opportunity for housing options?
I think so. I think there are some coding issues, safe air and light, requirements that would need to be addressed. But I do think it would be a hugely missed opportunity if we didn't look at those buildings as a potential place to address a long-standing housing crisis in this country. So I don't know if it's actually moving, but I think with the Jobs and Infrastructure Act as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, there's a lot of capital, equity, investment dollars coming down the pipeline, and it will be up to the states and the cities to decide where some of those resources go. I certainly hope it goes towards affordable housing and that communities have a say in what investments occur in their neighborhoods. That's first and foremost.
Stacy, I wanted to ask you, we were talking earlier, you've worn a lot of hats in the housing world, key positions in Baltimore, Howard County, Montgomery County, which is where I live, private sector, as well as professor. Where do you see inefficiencies when it comes to creating more affordable housing? You have a pretty unique perspective and vantage point.
I think the biggest inefficiency is land use and the flexibility around it and how long it takes to change zoning or modify zoning. That really is the key to much of this. In addition to that, I think unfortunately, when we sit in the chairs, we're so focused on the day-to-day issue that we completely lose sight of the bigger opportunity and challenge around housing folks and keeping them housed. To Seema's point, there are commercial buildings that have been converted to housing space for time immemorial. It used to be a lot easier. Nowadays, it's incredibly difficult. In order to get this right of first refusal legislation passed in Colorado, it took a year and change. A year. So now in a year, prices have escalated significantly and families are more precariously housed now than they were at the start of that year, right? Ridiculous. And so there's so many inefficiencies. I think the real issue is government ought to be moving urgently because people are having urgent problems. They're experiencing urgency every single day. And what happens is because the decisions are so difficult, we put them off for another day, and we try and figure out how to solve it down the road. The bottom line is that you folks, your families, your relatives, your friends, everyone around you who is facing some level of housing insecurity, that's a today problem. That's a right now problem. And we do ourselves a disservice because we're passing on a level of anxiety around housing security that we can't ever address adequately. And the bottom line is that impacts everything. I mean, I don't know about you all, but as a child, and it feels like not that long ago, as we happened upon housing insecurity, I had to live a duality. Literally pretend by day that everything was cool, as I'm panicking about where we're going to go to sleep that night. And that's, my mom and 4 children, right? And do it the next day and the next day. And you wonder why children have behavioral issues and why they're hungry. And please, if you're worried about safety, I mean, we're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is at the very bottom of the pyramid. Forget about all this other stuff, right? And it makes you do desperate things. We can stop so much of this just by acting urgently, right? Act like housing is what it is, an urgent need. Act like it is what it is. It's infrastructure, the same as any sidewalk or highway. It's the thing that actually allows us to get up and be a part of this society.
I'm going to bring the audience in 1 second, so I want you guys to think about some questions here, but I wanted to leave the last question for the mayor here and our politician on the panel and see if she had a message of hope about about the housing issues that we all face as a country and in our communities. Are there causes to be hopeful about?
Absolutely. And can I just add one more thing?
Yes, please.
Okay. So in the city of Oakland, what we've done is we've also implemented for many years now a vacancy tax. And so if your home is vacant, it's not being rented out, or if you have a vacant lot and you're just refusing to sell it or develop on it, you will be taxed $6,000 plus. And I'm so excited to work on a ballot measure to actually increase that. Okay? I'm not playing around anymore. To your point, urgency. Urgency. You sell it. If you don't, then you're going to pay for it. Right? And so I just wanted to put that out there. And in regards to the hope aspect, absolutely. I mean, this is my first time meeting these two superheroes up here, and they give me hope already. I think that, my team and I, we always talk in Marvel terms or what have you, but there are Avengers out there in the world who are really trying to push the needle to really create the housing stock that we need. When you have people like the panel up here where we all have the live life experience, and this is not just a career move for us, but this is personal for us because we see the younger selves of us in other families. That's very personal. And so there is hope in that. There is hope in the fact that people are, and I hate to say this, but because the tents are showing up too close to their homes, they're going to want to do something about it. Right? So there's hope in that. And so I do see that there is hope. We just got to get the right leaders in the seat to really take it seriously and to say that, even outside of my own personal story, I know that women are being raped out there, children are being raped out there, and every night I go to sleep, I think about how difficult it must be to be sleeping in that encampment. Whether you have all of your mental capacities or whether you're abusing substance, that's not something that we can say, well, let that go by the wayside, because that's going to actually end up on your front doorstep. So the quicker we can take care of our families and ensure that they have the stability of housing, the quicker we can get them the help that they need. But you can't give people mental health support, or you can't help somebody to get off the abuse that they're abusing, whatever substance it is, if they don't have the housing piece. And so, but to your point, there is hope.
Well, thank you for that and that very real message of hope. Let's go to the audience now, and if you guys would please raise your hand if you have a question, and please identify yourself and say who you are, and if you have a question for a specific panelist, please let us know that as well. Over here.
Hi, my name's Joan Cato, and I was wondering what kind of role do you think Verbo and Airbnb have played in this issue? And what do you think can be done about it, especially from a local level and also a federal level?
Seema, you have some thoughts?
I can start. Those companies have had a huge impact on downtowns. The challenge really is that units are being taken off the housing market and turned into hotels, right? And so, downtown LA, for example, Little Tokyo is a community I know well because we go there a lot. And in that downtown area, Airbnb really, ruined a lot of that neighborhood. I'm sorry, I know they're a sponsor. They're also not going away, and I do understand that. And so for me, I think the solution really lies in regulation, which is happening in many cities. It also is too expensive to rent in many of these cities. So people, go to a hotel for a week is so expensive. So there's no they aren't going away. We have to regulate them. And me personally, I feel if something is owner occupied or, renter occupied, then it can be allowed, but what we don't want is those units taking housing away from these cities that is so direly needed. At the end of the day, this is about who gets to live in our cities, and those who have helped to build it, who are keeping the economy running, should also be allowed to live there.
Can I add on to that? Absolutely, to regulation. And it's hard, right? Because you have really great lobbyists out there. And let's just be really honest that, money is behind, who leads your cities. And so, having the tax is incredibly important. I think that working together with other neighboring cities and jurisdiction, even a whole region to say, look, let's agree that, let's work together to put on this tax across the board so that it's not as easy as like, okay, well, we'll just jump over here, right? And so I think that having that kind of agreement plays a really key role in how you target that, because to Seema's point about, it really shows like who's able to live in the city. You're going to want the people who are living in your city to be able to play and work in your city, right? Because it's obviously climate change. We have to care about climate change too, right? We want our grandbabies and their babies to be able to live here still. And so I think that it folds into, a bigger conversation.
Let's go on this side of the room, and then hopefully we'll have time to come back over here. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is John Paculdo Koenig chauffeur. I'm a second-year student at UC San Diego. My question goes out to all of you, but more specifically to the mayor, being from California. What steps should we take to make sure that people aren't going to use environmental protection regulations like the CEQA in California to block new housing from being built? Absolutely, yes. There's a whole conversation about using CEQA as a tool to really block new housing from being built, like NIMBYs and what have you. And there needs to be reforms. There needs to be reforms. There's, and we need to pass legislation that really allows for a ministerial passage of permits and what have you. And I think that some of those legislations are passing. I know that SB 35 in California really helped for me to develop 200 units of affordable housing in an area that is really affluent, above a freeway. We all know what that means, right? When I say above a freeway, because of redlining, it's everywhere, it's the whole nation. And so that's a project I'm really proud of, but that's only through ministerial management. And so we need to do more of that.
Let's stay over here in the blue, please.
Thank you. My name is Emily Wasik. I'm with the Asian and Pacific Islander American Health Forum. And my question pertains to the intersection of affordable housing and environmental justice. So studies have shown that communities of color in particular have been negatively affected by pollution in the air, water, and other parts of the environment due to historic redlining, negatively affecting mental and physical health. So what work are you doing in order to ensure that affordable housing also provides equitable health outcomes in relation to the environment where folks are living?
I might have planted this question.
He was up here saying, amen, yes, yes.
So I'll mention that, again, our foundation invests roughly $300 million annually in communities across the United States. And I started under 120 days ago. But one of the first things that I changed, and as I said, much of that is housing, access and affordability. The first thing I changed is a simple thing, I think. If you are going to apply for and receive a Wells Fargo housing access and affordability grant going forward, you have to have measurable key performance indicators, right? And not one time, continuous, around sustainability, which is one of our foundation's focus areas, to include in certain states water conservation and financial health. So that way we are actually making sure from the very beginning, every single nickel that's around housing access and affordability that goes out into these communities is in fact focused on our entire community, its whole health, and the outcomes of families and individuals who are living there.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Contessa Bourbon. I'm a journalist. I'd like to ask Seema, what has been done by capacity to help people get down payment or help them in their equity? And can you share some success stories or story? Thank you.
Sure, thank you for the question. So National Capacity is a HUD intermediary, and so we provide housing counseling services. So what that means is our member organizations working in local communities are contracted by HUD to provide in-language, culturally competent services. We know language access is a huge issue. And so our groups work with local residents, help them develop a budget, help them understand what down payment assistance programs are out there. And you can package those different types of down payment assistance together. So the city might offer some, Wells Fargo might offer one, so it's combining all of those to help a home buyer get the largest sum of support they can, and also help them to navigate the homeownership process. So we do have, I'm happy to report many success stories. I guess I could share in Queens, New York, there's a growing Nepali Tibetan population there in Jackson Heights, and the organization where I used to be, Chaya CDC, we were able to help many of those new arrivals to save and buy before Jackson Heights reached the level it is today. And I think many of those local residents are able to stay in that community because of the work of groups like Chaya, really. So we have many success stories. I'm happy to connect you to some of those clients if that's helpful. But that's really the main way we are doing that work. And we also released a series of PSAs, videos that describe fair housing, housing discrimination. We haven't talked about it that much today, but that's available in, I think, 16 different languages. So those are being broadcast on public radio, whatnot, just to make sure people know their rights and know what to do if they feel they faced discrimination in the process. Yeah.
Thank you, Seema. I think we are all out of time, if I'm correct. Okay, but maybe you could catch up with some of the panelists after our panel. I just want to thank you guys for some great questions today, and our panelists, Seema Agnani, Stacy Spann, and of course, Mayor Tao. Thank you so much for being here. That concludes our panel.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage APAICS board member and Vice President, Agent Sales of State Farm, Glenda Beach.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Like I said, like they introduced me, my name is Glenda Beach. I'm Vice President of Agency Sales with State Farm, based out of Dallas, Texas. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here. I also have the honor and privilege of being a board member on APAICS on behalf of State Farm. We've partnered with APAICS for many, many years because we share a similar mission and vision of the organization. And so allow me to thank you for your participation, your engagement, fantastic questions, but also allow me to thank Madeline. She'll be up here in a few minutes, but this wouldn't be possible without the CEO and President Madeline and her amazing staff. What a great, great tribute. Please. There are 73,000 of us. More of us than McDonald's, if you can believe that. 73,000 agents and employees throughout the nation. And what we do is we help more people in more ways. We're committed to living in the communities and representing the communities. And so hopefully this is not a buy or sell, but if you happen to have a State Farm agent, hopefully they also reflect you and your background and in your communities. What a fantastic forum to have this distinguished panel of subject matter experts, elected officials, community and corporate leaders to come together to talk about something that's near and dear, housing and affordability. So I'm half Vietnamese, half American. My father promised my mom, or promised his best friend, that he would take care of her family if something happened to him in the war. He was a consultant. He wasn't a military person. His best friend died, and he kept his promise, and here I am. We came to a small town in Kentucky. There were 8 of us, and we lived in 3 bedrooms. So talking about homeownership, affordability, and access, it hits near and dear to my heart. At State Farm, we live that vision every single day. Our philanthropic investments are to communities, to nonprofits who help build stronger communities, who help empower. We partner with those nonprofits to make sure that the financial literacy is there, the knowledge is there. So allow me once again to challenge you. I heard some amazing questions. What are you going to do with those questions? Will you go back and take what you learned today and execute one piece of knowledge that you had from this esteemed panel? On behalf of State Farm and all of our agents, allow me to say thank you. What a privilege to partner with you and to partner with you, Madeline. Come on up. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Glenda. Greatly appreciate you. You're like my Vietnamese sister, so thank you so much for all of the hard work that you put into being a member of our board. So let's give Glenda another round of applause. So what a fabulous day we've had today. I'm really honored that you could join us today. I hope you learned as much as I did from our fabulous panelists and moderators. Our speakers have just been so phenomenal. I've just had such great positive feedback from hearing from the audience and participants, learning all of the information that they've been willing to share. We obviously greatly appreciate our summit partners who have been here with us to make sure that we could put this event together: Amazon, AT&T, Johnson & Johnson, Meta, and State Farm. And we are also really honored to have all of you here today listening to those sponsored individual panels that were in the breakouts. We are obviously grateful for all of our panelists, our moderators, and special guest speakers sharing their expertise and insightful perspectives. Our partners support APAICS so that we can fulfill the mission of promoting Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander participation and representation at all levels of the political process. So please visit us at apaics.org so that you can learn more about our work. And I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow because we have an excellent lineup of speakers. You'll hear from folks like Senator Tammy Duckworth, Senator Mazie Hirono, Ambassador Catherine Tai, Lieutenant Governor of Hawaii Sylvia Luke, and Connecticut Attorney General William Tong. So thank you so much for staying with us today, and we will see you back here tomorrow at 8 a.m. for breakfast.